Hello and welcome to Adamantly Analog, a board gaming podcast. I'm your host, Harrison Dunn.
And I'm your other host, Corey Murphy.
Hey, Corey Murphy, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
You know what? Last week, I'm great. I should have answered that question. But last week, our big old discussion on deck builders and things that have come from deck builders just got me thinking, what other game mechanics are like that, that have been around and established for a while, and now we're seeing a bunch of variations on it or cool interpretations of that.
Oh, area control.
That's not worker placement.
Nope, it's
We
not.
decided to talk about worker placement.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So you suggested let's do that same thing with worker placement.
Yeah. And I love when Murphy appears in our podcasts and his floppy ears go in the background.
I don't even hear it anymore, but yeah, my dog will just like flap his ears. And I think Corey's pretty good about editing out. Don't you do it again, sir.
No, it's great. Let him have his way. That one I can't edit out because you were talking at the same time. It's just a little bit of the charm of being at Harrison's house.
Yeah. Yep. You got this one tiny dog who is the king of the world.
Aren't they all?
Yeah. Well, before we jump into different kinds of worker placement games, what have you been playing, Corey? You got anything to share with us?
Yeah, I managed to convince Nikki to play this game with me. We happen to have a spare 4 hours of time available.
Oh, very nice.
And to be fair, we were both pretty excited to try it, but we knew it was going to be a doozy because one of our friends had just learned it a couple days later, a couple days earlier, and he said, "Yeah, it took 4.5 hours to play and learn." That is the brand new Galactic Cruise, which is a humongous worker placement game. So I'm on topic here. And this is one of those Kickstarters I backed about a year ago, thinking, "Oh, this game looks awesome. I wonder if it's any good." And then I heard all these reviews from my friends around here, and they're like, "Yeah, it's really good." So I've been getting really excited about it. When it showed up, this box is like bigger than a Feast for Odin. I had no idea.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it like has gamer trays in it and all of that, and the bits are pretty chunky. I mean, like the workers are like actually like an inch and a half tall. Some of them. So it's a big production. Tool artwork, first time designers, so they've kind of put their heart and soul into this thing, and it shows. I mean, it's beautiful. The concept being. And in fact, you open the box and there's a letter addressed to you that sort of sets the tone, sets the theme. And the letter says something to the extent of like the CEO of a galactic cruise company is going to be retiring, and it's their life's work to build this company up to the place that it is now. So they're looking for a suitable replacement for them in 3 years' time. And so your job as a player is to demonstrate your ability to take on that task, to take on the company by fulfilling the company's objectives and scoring the most points, earning the most revenue for the company. And so you do that by basically doing, your daily work as a member of the Galactic Cruise team. You're building rockets, you're adding features to these rockets, you're scheduling these cruises, you're advertising the cruises so that meeples, people, can come and take them and go explore outer space and pay you lots of money. And there's a lot to this game. It's a big, chunky, heavy game to the levels of something like a Lacerda game. I'd say it's pretty close to to that
Oh boy.
level. Um, but thematically, it is pretty succinct, and I think that what you're trying to do, and this is true of Lacerda games too. I felt this way with Gallerist. I think this one's kind of similar to that. What you're trying to do makes a lot of sense, and the steps to accomplishing that task are, you know, expected, right? You have to build the rocket. You can buy blueprints. You have to advertise. You put people on the rocket, and they actually go through the routes of that cruise that you schedule for them. And each stop along the way has different features. Either they're just going out into space and enjoying some planetary excursions, or maybe they're staying on your rocket ship and they're exploring some of the features that you built into it.
Can you put a pool room on your rocket?
I think you can honestly. They're
Like
like all
a
these
whole room that's
whimsical
just
themes.
water?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think I had a water park on mine. Um,
Even
there's
better.
like yeah, there's like board game convention. There's rock climbing walls, but basically the different types of rooms fulfill the needs of the different kinds of guests. And there's three different kinds of guests. There's family guests, adventure guests, and leisure guests. So the way that you entice them or score the most points by having them on your cruise is you build rooms that they would like. And so there's all sorts of developing resources and technologies and expanding your possibilities of how many rockets you can build and how many resources you can store. And of course, there's a big point salad element to all of that. But all in all, for two players, it took about 3 hours to play and learn, which I don't think is too bad, honestly, considering that we were doing it for the first time and kind of bumbling through the rules. But I would recommend. I had a lot of fun the first time through. I know a lot of people are going to be interested in this one, given that it is kind of like the latest hotness these days, and I'll speak firsthand and say that it's kind of lived up to that in the first play. I got to play it a few more times to know for sure, but I liked it.
Cool. Yeah, that box art alone is just super striking. But you describing it as on the same level of Lacerda makes me go, ooh, okay. I'm gonna make
Yeah,
sure I'm really in the right headspace if I try that.
yeah, it's not for everybody, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I will say this though, as far as like the depth and like the complexity goes, Nikki and I played this together. I should say it was like I said, two player game. We were basically paced out almost exactly the same for the first like hour and a half of the game, as far as like when we fired off our first rockets and when we built our first rockets. And like it felt like we were kind of doing the same thing, just by slightly different routes as far as like which steps we took first.
Hmm.
By the end of the game though, the difference in points was like, I don't know, it was like 30 points between us. I won't say who won, but it was me.
Really?
I'm gonna take this one because she usually kicks my
Okay.
butt in these kinds of
Yeah, I
games.
was gonna say that doesn't sound like you and Nikki.
Yeah. Well, I have a slight edge the first time playing a game because I'm more willing to just like jump in and do
Mm,
stuff. And she's very like, she thinks through everything,
yeah.
which means that the second, third, fourth, and fifth time we play the game, I usually get crushed by her. So I look forward to that. But I had my moment and it was fun.
Cool. Yeah, we'll have to put it on the list.
Put it on the
But
list.
put it on the list, meaning put it on the list for when we only have time to play one ginormous game.
Yeah, yeah, that's the hard part with these games. Like all these new ones come out, and you're like, "Oh, I want to try that," but then it's a whole afternoon, and then your list becomes longer and longer because you can't keep up with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Well, hey, let's get right into it. I'm excited to talk about this topic because worker placement games are, it's a standard. It's a gold standard in the board gaming world. We've got all of those famous old worker placement games, the Agricolas and the Stone Ages that really set the tone for this concept of putting out a dude. They do a thing for you. You get a bunch of resources or whatnot, and then you do your thing and get more points.
Yeah,
We have all these great worker placement games. What was the first one you played, Corey? Like, do you have like fond memory of the first time you played a worker placement game?
yeah, I do. Yeah, I don't have a cheeky answer like you gave me last week with War and the deck builder, but I'm sure there's some like more common iteration of this concept in like a Milton Bradley level game that I've been exposed to, and nothing comes to mind yet. But the first time I saw it in like a hobby board game was Lords of Waterdeep,
Mm-hmm.
and I know it's not the first worker placement game out there, but it might have been the one that was most widely available or widely played, maybe. Um, you're the one to kind of like break through, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Now, there are others, I'm sure. Like I'm thinking of like Stone Age is another popular one. Agricola, obviously, was
Mm-hmm.
was released to great acclaim. But Lords of Waterdeep just struck me as an interesting game from the images I saw of it, and I was intrigued enough to just buy it without even putting too much research into it. And when I started to uncover like how the game worked, the concept of just like placing a dude and that dude does stuff automatically for you, that was really cool. It was really novel at the time. Of course, now I've played 13,000 of those types of games. But I remember the first time seeing that and being like, wow, that's neat. That's nothing like rolling dice and moving around the Monopoly board.
Right, right. Yeah, it's kind of a cool thing. Lords of Waterdeep was my first worker placement too, and it might have
Mhm.
been with you, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
whole fun house of folks that you lived in back in
Yeah.
college. Uh, that little rickety house by the train tracks.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, that was such a novel experience because up to that point, I think I'd played like Dominion and Catan, And so here comes a D&D themed game that's not D&D and plays super smoothly, and you're sending these workers around, which are your agents, as you're one of the infamous Lords of Waterdeep. So being a big
Mhm.
D&D nerd back then, that was really appealing to me too.
Yeah, and that game holds up. I mean, it's still a great game.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know,
Super is.
after Lords of Waterdeep, I can't think of, like, what came next for me, you know, and I'm looking at my shelf, I've got about 15 worker placement games sitting over there, but back like, I mean, this was, like, the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and I was thinking, "Yeah, this game's awesome. I wanna see more of this," and at the time, I don't think there was a lot to choose from.
Hmm. Yeah, I think my next one was Stone Age, and I just remember being so put off by the need to feed your people. Like it was just stressful to me, and it wasn't
Yeah.
a hey, you should plan better so you can feed your people. It was more of a you can't just do whatever you want in this game. You are encouraged and required to think ahead. And little old college brain me was just like, man, I just want to roll dice and get sheep.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the point where you become a hardcore gamer and you value the tightness and the misery of something like Stone Age or Agricola where you're punished for not being able to manage your resources properly because your people starve and you lose points.
Or
um,
taking it further to that, like recognizing, oh, actually, uh, now not feeding my workers is a cost that I'm willing to pay to get this other thing that I really
yeah,
want,
there
right?
you
An
go. That's
opportunity
true.
cost. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Agricola was probably the second one for me. And it was years after Lords of Waterdeep. I bought a used copy of it on Facebook Marketplace. But it had always been one that kind of lingered in my brain as like, I gotta try that one. It's a classic, right?
Hmm.
And I have this sweet copy of it with a nice insert on it, and man, I got the wooden meeple animal bits version of it. Ooh, so good. Now, speaking of Agricola, have you seen the Zombies Agricola coming out? I'm not joking
What?
about this.
Nope. Yeah, I no, I haven't.
Yeah, they're
Mm.
remaking this one, a Castles of Burgundy special edition treatment to Agricola, and there is a Zombies expansion, which only reminds me of the Pride and Prejudice and Zombies thing we had talked about previously.
So is it Agricola you play as zombies or you're defending against zombies?
Oh my god, I don't know. I imagine they're trying to kill your sheep probably, but who
Oh man,
knows?
this is it. Oh, zombie sheep. This is
Yeah.
important. We got to do a follow up on this.
Yeah, I think it's called Dead Harvest or something, but yeah,
Okay.
it's
Hmm.
a thing.
Well, Corey, last week you quizzed me on the very first implementation or use of deck building. And so I went down the rabbit hole in Wikipedia trying to find the first worker placement game. And let me tell you, that's a weird resource. I wouldn't necessarily rely on it.
Yeah.
Wikipedia's a little bit sketchy, but I think I pulled out some information and then corroborated it with BGD. Which of the following is cited as the first worker placement game? I got four choices for you here: Kalis, Kedum, Stone Age, Agricola.
Huh. Well, I will vouch for Wikipedia being at least a source of finding the release dates of these games. So, I mean, that's helpful, right? But it's,
Yeah.
it could be that there's something older than the games listed. Now, I've heard Kalis referred to as the first worker placement game many times, but then I also hear the argument that there's something before it. So I'm not super familiar with Kedum, but that's not ringing any bells. That might be the one. I'm gonna go with Kalis.
You're gonna go with Kalis. Okay.
Yeah.
So Kalis came out in 2005, but Kedum came out in 1998.
Oh my gosh, it
Now
was.
I know, right? Right. Stone Age was 2008, and Agricola was 2007. So Kedum, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I do know that it was later re-implemented as Aladdin's Dragons, which was a little bit more popular and well accepted. So
A
maybe you've
little
heard of
bit.
that one.
No.
No? Oh, okay.
No.
Aladdin's Dragons is a almost like a worker bidding type game
Okay.
where you are assigning workers to different dragons, and then once everyone's assigned their workers, whoever's kind of like got the most power assigned to different regions of the boards gets to do the thing. So
Mm.
it has technically you're placing workers out and doing it, but it's a little bit different. So Kalis is probably the closest to what we know now as worker placement, but the origins are rooted back to Kedem or Aladdin's Dragons.
Yeah, this is
So
an old Rio Grande game, so you can imagine what the artwork looks like.
yeah,
Real
one
nice.
color, maybe two.
Watercolor, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you got that right or wrong, but
I got it wrong.
you got it wrong. So that means I'm going to jump into our list first. We'll just jump right in. We're talking about games that we think are cool takes on worker placement or do cool things in that space. So my first choice, and I didn't realize at first that this kind of counts as a worker placement. So if we think about the idea of you're taking a dude and you're putting it on the board and you're doing a thing, then Takedo from 2012 from Funforge fits the bill, right? In
Yeah.
Takedo, you are taking or planning a trip along the coast of Japan to see sights, visit temples, go shopping, and things like that. And what Takedo does that I think is fairly unique even today is that it's basically just one single track, and on your turn you can move as far as you want on that track and take whatever action you want. Uh, but if you are the person in first, then it's not your turn. So it's always the person who's furthest behind who's going. And that is a kind of a cool take on the worker placement. So you're probably not going to take the same number of actions, unless you're just hopscotching over each other the entire game, which could happen. But
Mm.
most of the time, and the way the game's designed is there are things that you're going to want to skip ahead for to try to get before your opponents get to, and that definitely elicits the same feel as a worker placement game where you're worried about people taking the spaces that you need to complete your individual goals. So even though it plays out a little bit differently because it's just kind of like one long track and you only have one worker, it still plays very similarly to that, and I think is definitely like evokes the feeling of a worker placement game.
Yeah, that's good. I was kind of thinking about whether or not this type of system would work, and I mean, by definition, you're placing a worker on a tile and you're doing the thing that the tile says. So that's worker placement, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly right. Yeah, you're collecting different sets. You're trying to do different goals.
yeah. I was
Uh,
thinking about including parks on this list for that reason, but I'm glad we got it covered with Tokaido.
yeah, yeah. Parks is pretty similar. In fact, Parks maybe feels more worker placement because you are just collecting sets of resources to turn in for goals, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have never played Tokaido though.
I was just about to ask. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's it's I don't know if it holds up. I haven't played it in a long while,
Mm.
and there was a fun story behind this one. I don't remember if I've shared this or not, but I'm gonna share it again, and then you can cut it out if you were like, yeah, you shared that story, Harrison.
Okay.
When I first got to Kaido or wanted to get to Kaido when I played it, I went to the local game store and this was probably 2000. It came out in 2012, so I think it must have been 2012 or 13. I went to the game store to go pick up a copy, and they told me, "Nope, we just sold the last one 20 minutes ago." And I was
No,
like,
no.
"Oh my god!" I called ahead and everything, and they yeah, I didn't leave a name. I was just like, "Yeah, no one's gonna go buy Takedo." It was gone. Fast forward to that evening when one of Lauren's friends from high school, is crashing at our apartment because she was living on campus, and we have our homeless night or homeless nights as we call it, where all the campus housing kind of turns over and everyone leaves their lease and starts their lease at the same time, but they need like a day for stuff to turn over. It's a weird time.
Yeah, it is. Happy
So
Christmas.
yeah, hippie Christmas. That yeah, everyone's throwing their stuff on the side of the road, and then you can go dumpster diving for some actually pretty nice stuff. Uh, aside in the aside, the desk that I'm currently using, I got from Hippie Christmas. So,
Mhm.
um, so anyway, Lauren's friend from high school, we hadn't talked to her in years and years and years. She stays with us for the night, and as we're hanging out and playing, she's like, "Hey guys, I got this new board game." It was Takedo. She was the one who had bought it just
Oh,
20 minutes
no.
before I did.
You were
Yeah.
like, "Get out.
Yeah, yeah, it
Get
was it was
out."
wild. So, that's a fun little story about Takedo for
That's
you.
awesome. Tokaido's
Yeah.
really pretty. I would like to try this, and I think I've seen some, like, super deluxe versions of this too with,
Mhm.
like, giant pieces and things. River of Gold, similar also, if you guys have, tried River of Gold, the new game in the Legends of the Five Rings universe, has that same kinda concept of you're moving one direction down the river. In that
Mhm.
game, you get to the end of the river and you just reset back to the top. I don't know if that's a
Right.
mechanic in Tokaido,
It's not,
but,
no. When you
you
hit
know,
the end of the road on Tokaido, the game's over, you're done.
yeah, but the concept of, like, you can push it as fast as you want, but the risk is that other people are gonna get more value out of the stuff that they're kind of limping through.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. So, long-winded explanation aside, that's my first pick, Tokaido.
Love it. All right, my first pick is the most underrated game of all time. This is a Prospero Hall game who always knocks it out of the park with their IP games. And this one is 2020's Pan Am. And I wouldn't call this an IP necessarily, but it is, well, I don't know. Is it? Does that Pan Am count as an IP? I suppose it does.
I mean, intellectual property, trademark,
Yeah.
sure, we're conflating things, but let's go with it.
Okay, well, the idea is that this kind of describes this golden age of air travel, as it says on the cover of the game box. But everything is drenched in this 1960s glamour of flying in an airplane theme, including the inside of the box, which is really cool. Side note, production is through the roof on this one for its price point. But this is a route building game at its core. However, it is a worker placement game too, in a big and important way because the board has all of the different actions surrounding the map in the center of the board, and your turn consists of placing your worker on one of the different action spaces, and in some cases, you're actually bidding for that action space by placing your worker, which is called an engineer in this game. And so those spaces are like buying aircrafts for your fleet, bidding on landing rights in certain cities, bidding on the ability to place an airport, which only one person is going to get to do that a turn, and that's a very powerful thing to do. Getting objective cards, planning routes, things like that. And so you go around, you have a round of worker placement, and then you resolve everything in alphabetical order A, B, C, D, and E based on who ended up winning each of those spots. So it's really cool. I mean, there's a lot going on here and it's very strategic. There's a little bit of randomness in the way that the stocks fluctuate because this is a stock buying game. That's how you win the game, is to have the most stocks. But the uniqueness of the worker placement is what really drew me in the first place, and the theme and the enjoyment of the route building is what kept me here.
Yeah, I've not played this one, but I know you're a huge fan of it, and
Yeah.
when I opened up the show notes today and saw it there, I was like, "Yep, I knew this was gonna happen. This is cool. I'm gonna have to play this game. Put it on the
Yeah.
list."
Well, as much as I love talking about this game, I think it just does a good job of representing the theme, which is evolution of worker placement. It's doing it in a very different way from
Mhm.
something like Agricola or Caelus. So here we are. That is Pan Am from Prospero Hall.
Well, my number 2, is a little bit more in the traditional sense of a worker placement game, but I picked it because it lets you do something else on your turn besides place a worker, and that is Everdell from Starling Games, back all the way back in, ye old 2018. So, Everdell is a real popular one at this time. They're still making Everdell expansions for it. They just came out with just came out, quote, unquote, the Everdell Far Shore, like the new version of it. So, chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you're a fan of board games. You've played Everdell, or you at least know what it is. But
Yeah.
I really like the worker placement in this one because you get that sort of asymmetrical pacing through the game, where on your turn you can place a worker or you can play a card, and the different costs of the cards and the different shifting priorities for different goals means that at some point you're going to be off pace with people in how workers come out,
Right.
what season of the game you're in. And I just think that's a really neat take on it because it takes that idea of timing and kind of twists it around. You know, now maybe I really need this certain spot, but I know that you are going to be taking your next reset soon, your next season. So if I can hold out just a little bit longer, maybe you'll get that rid of that space, and I can jump on it with my last worker. There's some really cool dynamics there, especially when you get into two players with it.
Yeah, this game is really a masterclass in that it's thematically confusing that someone can be in fall and you can be in summer at the same time. But I
Yep.
think that's really what is unique about it is the fact that you can be like, "Oh man, I can't believe you're still getting all that value out of the fall. Well, I'm like 2 seasons ahead of you." Yet still, it doesn't mean that that person's gonna win because the person that
Mhm.
finishes first has first dibs at all the scoring tiles.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So the change of season is really a big jump in resources and power thing. So yes, your you know the bang per buck on your actions might be good, but the other person is their engine is exploding and they might have more to do at that point. Um,
Mhm.
and they're going to beat you to those end game things for sure. So there's a nice push and pull there, and we can't talk about Everdell and not talk about just how gorgeous of a production this is. I would say as far as worker placement games go, this has got to be my number one production wise. Just absolutely gorgeous.
Mhm.
Even if the giant tree that you have to assemble to put in the middle of the table is a pain in the butt.
Yeah, the art's beautiful. You kinda lay out this tableau in front of you that I mean, everything is just so stylized. It's like you really live in this world when you play Everdell.
Yep, 100%. So that is my second pick, Everdell.
Okay, my second pick is Yokohama, from 2016. It was released by TMG Games originally, but of course, it is most recently available in its reprinted glory from Synapses Games. And I have upgraded my copy to the Synapses Games version, yet I kind of miss my original. It had some charm to it. It was this very colorful, bubbly world
Mhm.
in the Meiji era of Japan. How'd I do, Harrison?
You did good this time. Yeah, nice job.
Yeah, that's a word I struggled to pronounce when we brought this up in the past. But as far as evolution of worker placement goes, I can't not talk about Yokohama because the whole concept of this game is you are placing on your turn two or three workers, or sometimes one if you don't have enough, on a variety of different action tiles across the board. And you get to move your president, which is the larger meeple in your collection, down the route created by your placed workers and stop on one of the tiles that you want to activate. Now, the president is the one that determines which action you take. The workers are the ones that power it up. So, the more workers you've built up on that tile, the more value you're going to get out of that experience. All the way up to the point where there's an extra added bonus when you activate for 5 power. And you get to build there's some kind of structures that you can build. I can't think of the names of them now. Villages, maybe villages and
Yeah,
cities.
they're the buildings, factories, warehouses, something like that.
Yeah, and when you activate for 4 and 5 power, which makes subsequent actions on that tile more valuable. So in its core, you're just doing a bunch of resource collection, fulfilling recipes in this game. There's technology to build that makes you better at the game. There are more contracts to pick up, and then there's all sorts of ways to cash in for points as the game nears its conclusion.
Yeah, this is I think I mentioned one of the ones that I really got into on Board Game Arena at the start of the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, there's just something about it. Like, yes, it's technically a worker placement, but so much about it feels so different from a worker placement, even though it's still got the, action draftingness of a worker placement. You have a little bit more area control though. You have this spatial puzzle to figure out, and all in all, it just makes this very different twist on what is just a worker placement game. It's super
Mm,
cool.
yeah. And there's something really fun about increasing the potential that you have for actions as you go through the game and then finally getting to push that button and go off on that action. And
Yep.
there's a lot of games that do that really well, but there's not a lot of games like Harrison said that actually feel like Yokohama. I think this one is really an original.
Yeah.
So again, that is Yokohama from TMG Games originally and later Synapses Games.
All right. Well, I did a switcheroo while we've been talking, Corey. I was going to pick something else to
What?
talk for my number three, but I switched it to Thunderworks Games game because I can't not talk about this one.
Yeah. And we got to get
So
Stan on here.
yeah, we got to get Stan on. We should really talk to Stan. Uh, so we talked about how Kedem was one of the original worker placement games, and that was reimplemented as Aladdin Dragons. Well, let me tell you, you've probably played Aladdin's Dragons in some form because that's what Lockup from Thunderworks Games is really inspired by.
Oh, I've never played Lockup.
Oh, well, okay then, fine. Just don't play my favorite game from Thunderworks. Seriously,
Oh.
this game's incredible. It's so good. So Lockup is a role player tale, is about the warring or battling gangs within this fictional prison, and you play as a gang of bugbears or goblins or kobolds or something, these fantasy races.
Mhm.
And each round, you are placing the members of your crew into different rooms. But your crew members have different strengths between 1 and 4 or 5. And then you have a variable strength one that you can kind of level up through the game. But as you're placing these characters out, you can place up to two of them face down throughout the round. So you can kind of hide your intents.
Mm.
But basically, you go until every player has played out all their crew members, and then you resolve all the rooms, giving a reward to whoever's got the most strength in that room. So much
Oh,
like a
okay.
worker placement game, you're placing your workers out to different locations to try to get a thing or get a reward. But a lot of times, those rewards are not guaranteed or might be changed up based on how other players have also placed their crew members. Uh,
Nice.
it takes the worker placement element of that combative I want this action and lets you duke it out for it. It's not just who gets there first, it's who gets there first with the most power. And that really, oh man, it makes this game so tense. It is one of the most interactive games that I really enjoy playing. um we should put this on the top of the list, Corey. You should play this one. It's really something
Okay.
else.
Yeah, I've wanted to try it. It looks really fun. I like the art of the board, the different
Mhm.
rooms kind of from this like aerial view.
Yeah, we mentioned Stan because this is a Stan Kordonsky design. So it is still available elsewhere. It's not currently in print, but it's still around. You can get your hands on a copy.
Nice.
So
Put
that
it on
is
the list.
Lockup from Thunderworks Games.
All right. My third and final pick is The Lost Runes of Arnak 2020 from Czech Games Edition. And I mean, come on. This one seems like low-hanging fruit here, but I can't not. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and I think it represents a really important niche in the worker placement um, worker placement world. I don't know what I'm trying to say,
Yeah,
but that of playing a card to determine where you can play your worker. And obviously, that is a big part of Dune Imperium too. I would love to talk about that one, but I only have space for 3 games on my list. But Lost Ruins of Arnak is a nice combination of deck building and worker placement and all sorts of other things, lots of resource conversion. But not only is it one of the greatest productions of all time and most exciting themes of all time, it's actually a really solid worker placement game, too. So everyone starts out with a very basic deck of a set number of cards. They all have a function on them, such as get a coin, get a compass, which are the two core resources in this game. There's more, but those are the primary ones. But on the top of the card and in the tiny little corner, there's a type of travel symbol depicted. And that could be travel by foot, travel by vehicle, travel by boat, or travel by airplane. And so the different types of symbols can be used to place your worker in different locations on the board. Of course, you start out in these campsite locations because that's what you can get to by foot until you upgrade your deck and you have access to more, valuable vehicle types. And you can go further and further into the jungle, which I kind of buried the lead on this one. You're exploring this jungle and looking for runes, while these kind of fantasy like Indiana Jones themed monsters attack you along the way.
yeah, very like classic, like pulp novel
Yeah,
covers and things like that.
yeah. And while you're doing this, you're adding these cards to your deck that have better travel symbols, but of course they have better effects too. So you have kind of this like push and pull, this multi-use card thing, where it's like, okay, I want to use this to go further into the jungle. This one even provides 2 travel symbols, which is really nice. But it's also a really good card, so I don't want to pass up the opportunity to play it and get its effect. Um, Not to mention this being a very small deck. Purchasing these cards, you get to see them really, really soon. I mean, they go like some of them go right into your discard pile and get played immediately when you
Hmm.
buy them. The artifacts do. So it's kind of neat to say, okay, well, I'm gonna have some worker placement power at the ready, so I can plan for my next turn.
Yeah, yeah. I've only played it a handful of times. Once with the base game, once with an expansion, where you had like little crew members that had powers.
Hmm.
And every time we bring it up, you tell me about the cooperative expansion, and I just go, man, I need to get that.
Yeah. Well, in fact, they just announced a new expansion. There's like a limited print run of this kind of like legacy box they're coming out with, which is mostly just a giant empty box with gamer trays that holds everything.
Oh,
But
okay.
there's also a unique expansion that gets packed into that too. New board.
Hmm.
But I'm most excited about the fact that that can store everything because my box of Lost Ruins is just a total mess of little baggies of different size bits and things. So that is the Lost Ruins of Arnak from Czech Games Edition.
Corey, if we continue this trend of talking about twists on mechanics, you really set yourself up for a doozy because we
What's that?
did we did deck building, then we did worker placement, and you've picked a game that is both deck building and worker placement. So if we do this again next week, you're going to have to pick a game that's all three.
Oh yeah. Oh, let me think about that. I think I can make it happen actually.
Depends on what we pick, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a list. We did it again. That's 6 games, 3 from each of us. We have my list for Takedo, Everdell, and Lockup, and Corey's list with Pan Am, Yokohama, and Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Yeah.
Good job. We did it. All right, Corey. Well, that wraps up another episode. And you know what? I'm so sick and tired of talking to you, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell me what you've been up to. What have you been doing besides playing all these cool board games?
Oh, well, when this episode actually releases, I will be on a band trip with the band in New Orleans. We've got a band tour every 3 or so years in our school, and we're going to Louisiana this year.
That sounds pretty cool. Is that like a competition thing or just a performance? What's the dealio?
Performances. So it's a 6-day tour, and the kids can opt in or out of the trip. Of course, it costs money, so some of them are saying, I might want to save that money, and it's over spring break. So they're kind of giving up their spring break time for this too. But everyone's pretty psyched to do it, and we are going to play 4 times out there. And the performances are like stand and play outside of this park, or do a parade in the French Quarter, kind of thing. So
Hmm.
looking forward to doing that. Of course, we'll get some touring in there too. The kids are excited to feed an alligator, and so am I.
Just don't feed each other to the alligator.
Well, we thought about that. That's for sure. And then there's a graveyard tour, which of course is a big part of like the New Orleans history. And yeah, I guess the thing
Cool.
I'm most excited for though, honestly, is the food. So I'll be coming back having had every beignet I can muster, and all of the jambalaya and gumbo and crawdads and everything I can find.
I'm hungry now. Thanks.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, that wraps up another episode. Like I've said, thank you everyone so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. Adamantly Analog is Corey Murphy and Harrison Dunn. Original themes and bumper music by Corey Murphy. Reach us at adamantlyanalog@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.